of day one of iDTX 22. We are with the Heidi Kirby. This is of the Block podcast and LinkedIn and Twitter fame. Um, at least in my household. The number of times I walk
Wow.
around going, look at this tweet. Is this not exactly what I was moaning about earlier? And my wife's like, yes, it is.
Which is interesting because I am hardly ever on Twitter unless I get like roped in.
Clearly, it's just those moments where it's a case of I'm going to post something. It's like, yep, that needed to be posted.
Yeah,
So
totally.
that's excellent. Anyway, that's not what we're here to discuss. Maybe that's a different session next time. So we are building a leadership development framework using core values. Can you tell my screen is far too far away for me to read while also looking at the camera? It's not the most professional approach in the world. As before, I'm going to get out of the way and hand over as quickly as possible. And there we go. I'll stop ruining it now.
Oh my goodness. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Yep, I'm going to be talking today about creating a leadership development framework. And so, skip ahead. In case you don't know me, I'm Heidi Kirby. I started my career in learning and development as a college English professor, but I say I'm a former and now current college professor because just this semester I actually picked up a class again after some time, and I'm teaching graduate level podcasting now. So that's kind of exciting. I am a PhD candidate in instructional design and technology with Old Dominion University, and I've worked in corporate ID and am now working in customer education. And as Tom kindly mentioned, I host the Block, or Building Learning and Organizational Culture podcast. And as he also mentioned, I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter a lot, really talking about helping new instructional designers and people in L&D get into the field. So what I want to do is kind of set the stage for the let's get practical and talk about what we're not going to be covering today. And that is that we're not talking about change management, right? So I'm not going to give you the different ways to kind of implement a leadership development framework. I'm not going to talk about how to get buy-in. Basically, what we're going to talk about today is like building the foundations of what that framework looks like. And in the spirit of being as practical as possible, what I want to do is make sure that you're thinking about other ways, in case you don't develop leaders in your organization, that you can apply this both professionally and personally. So if you lead a team, this can also be a good framework to use for professional development. And if you're a job seeker, this could be a good framework for you to use to kind of upskill and learn more. Okay, so I'd love for you to think about whether or not you have a clear path forward at your organization. Do you know how to get promoted? Do you know how to move up within your organization? And that kind of thing. And you don't have to answer in the chat or anything like that. You can just kind of hypothetically listen and just join in. So let me go ahead and move on. So these are a couple of pretty, maybe not surprising, but pretty staggering statistics here. Only 6% of employees feel that their company is excellent at enabling internal mobility, and 36% of employees felt their company was inadequate at helping internal employees change roles. And so this comes from a 2019 Deloitte study, and it really just kind of shows the importance. I know we're not going to talk too much about it, but it just kind of shows the importance of why having a leadership development program and why developing your leaders is such a critical thing for organizations. So I invite you, this really truly is a workshop. I invite you to join in. If you have, a pen and paper handy or a Post-it note, or you want to open another tab on your computer, I'd really love for you to join in and think about the different ways that you can use this in your own organization. And so we're going to start with core values. So these are the beliefs that drive your organization. And what I've done here, for the sake of showing you an example of what this framework looks like, is I've shared out 3 of the most popular company core values, according to some random blog on the internet. But I have seen these a lot in different organizations. And so company core value of teamwork, very popular one, and it's defined by clear roles on the team, great relationships within the team, and then a pretty high performance output. If you think of like of good solid teams, they're always producing, they're always productive, they're always sharing resources. And like if you think of like a sales team, I've never been in sales, but I've seen like on LinkedIn and other social media, like sales teams hyping each other up, right? So that's teamwork. And then customer focus is another one that is pretty prevalent in a lot of different companies. So this is defined by just the knowledge of who the ideal customer is that you're serving, having those great customer connections and relationships, and having a really high satisfaction rate with your different customers. The third one is respect, and that's remaining calm when you're having difficult or confrontational conversations or situations. Making sure that everyone within your team and within your organization is treated fairly, and just respecting and honoring people's boundaries. So I'd like you to take a moment to go ahead and jot down what your company's core values are. If you have to open a tab and Google what they are, because it's been a while since you learned them during onboarding, or in case they're not painted on the wall of your organization, like some of the places where I've worked, no judgment. But what are your company's core values? What are the values that they ingrain in their daily practice, if they have them? Some companies don't. But if they don't have any, what would you guess that their core values would be? And also, if you are thinking of this from a non-leadership development perspective, you could always think of what the core values of your team are, if you're doing team professional development, or even your core values as a person, if you're a job seeker and you're thinking about ways to kind of create your own professional development path or plan. So just take a moment to kind of gather those core values, because that's step 1 of the framework that we're going to put together. And then step 2 is to collect the different levels of leadership that exist within your organization. And so this is different depending on the organization, but I'm going to share some examples with you that'll help you kind of think of how to frame this. If you're kind of attending for a professional/personal framework, you could always think of these as the levels of leadership that the different people on your team could attain, the level of leadership that you're looking to attain, things like that. So who are the leaders in our organization? And if you've heard of the leaders at every level philosophy, this is borrowed from that. And I've just added a few different tips, considerations when you're thinking about putting together a leadership development program for different people. So you've got the C-suite. These are the top people at the organization, the chief blank officers of the organization, right? And they are people who we're hoping will lead by example, and people who we're hoping are able to, be early adopters of things that we're trying to do and help the change management process. But they're also, in my experience, the first people who are able to get the exemption for training, right? They're able to get the pass in the LMS, and their time is really valuable, right? And so when you're thinking about putting together leadership development for them, just remember that their time is very valuable and that they're often pretty busy. The leaders of leaders are the people who are managing and leading the leaders of teams at your organization. And these people are managing both brand new leaders and leaders who have been leading teams for years and years and years, which leads us to leaders of others who have their teams and can be brand new, have never had direct reports before, or could have been leading teams for 30 years. So you really want to think about the, broad experience that the leaders of others and the leaders of leaders have in your organization when you're kind of planning how you're going to form this. The leader of self, this one I love because sometimes I feel like we forget about our individual contributors when we're creating leadership development. And I don't think we should, because everyone has something to offer to the organization. And like the stats we looked at before, a lot of times people want to move up within their organization. They aspire to be a leader. And it's actually okay if they don't also. But we want to make sure that we're always giving them ways to develop and get better. And if you've worked in L&D, especially in instructional design where I come from, I've had to lead projects. I've had to have those very sometimes awkward conversations with people who are way above me on the org chart about, hey, I need you to review this course in 2 weeks. And, hey, you haven't reviewed my course yet. Can you please give me some feedback? And so there are leadership aspects to every individual contributor role, whether or not the person wants to move up. So I think leader of self is something that we should definitely consider. And then the one that's a little bit different, which is the leader of function. So some people may not have direct reports, but they may be in charge of entire programs or functions. And that might look different depending on what your organizational makeup is. But I like to picture them as like the people on the org chart who are kind of like hanging out by themselves over on the side that have like a really important job because they're, overseeing an entire function. But they may not have direct reports. So I think it's important to also still grow those people as well. And so think about the different levels of leadership within your organization. If you don't know and you have access to an org chart, that can maybe be helpful. Or if you're just thinking within your team, how high up can your team go? What different opportunities does your team have within the team? And then for your own self, how high would you like to go? And so once we've collected the core values and our levels of leadership, we are going to identify the key behaviors for those core values at each level of leadership. And so let's talk first about what key behaviors are, because that's important to define. And so what do the core values look like in practice? And so by definition, key behaviors are measurable actions that demonstrate that an employee has a specific competency. So you can think of them as kind of the bullet points in a job description, right? So what are the different responsibilities laid out in the job description? Those are key behaviors. Those are things that as a hiring manager, people are looking for in a certain employee. But what's important when we're going to define what the key behaviors are for every level of leadership is that we're going to look at that leadership level for the entire organization, right? So your leaders of leaders are going to include people from HR, sales, marketing, IT, finance, the list goes on, all the different departments. So when creating the leadership development program, we want to make sure that we cover all of those departments. We're not looking for super specific technical skills because it's important to kind of have the leaders across your organization having the same experience so that they're having a consistent message, right? And so that they're the expectations of what a leader looks like in your company are also consistent, right? And so if they're working through this material together, that also encourages them to work together, right? Which is nice because then you can hopefully have more collaboration between departments and maybe tear down some of those silos. So just think about that it has to encompass the entire level of leadership for that piece of the organization, right? And so what does that look like? I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. And then I'd love to just give you a couple of minutes, and you can actually just go ahead and do this while I'm talking, to think of what you might consider key behaviors for a couple different leadership levels for the core values that you've identified. This is just one level. I didn't want to build out the whole framework and overwhelm everybody, but this is just one level. I chose to look at leader of others, so people who are leading a team. And again, we have those core values that we talked about at the very beginning: teamwork, customer focus, and respect. And so under teamwork, leader of others should be able to build trust with their team members, right? Trust is something that comes up a ton in the leadership literature that I look at as such a critical piece of creating relationships between yourself and your team members. You also want the leader of others to provide constructive criticism to the team. And under customer focus, how do we make sure, this one's a little bit more difficult, right? Because how do we make sure that all of our leaders across the organization are focused on the customers? And they may or may not be interfacing with the customers, right? So we have to kind of think about what kinds of competencies are we looking for across the board. And so, for maybe a SaaS company or a company that has a product, staying up to date on product updates would be a great example of a key behavior. Everyone in the organization would have some sort of stake in keeping up with the product, right? Like, it would be important for them to keep up with it, even if they're not directly working on it. And then helps to solve difficult problems, right? So if they're brought a problem from a customer, and this can happen, and I've seen it happen in all different departments, are they able to then go ahead and help whoever is helping the customer solve that problem? And then finally, under respect, showing sensitivity to the needs of others. So kind of the empathy that we hear a lot about, again, in the leadership literature, like how do we show empathy to our team members? And then provides resources to promote an inclusive culture is another way to show respect and make sure that we're including and respecting everybody in the entire organization. So go ahead and jot down maybe an idea or two for one of the leadership levels that you've identified for a couple of the different core values. I think that these are definitely something that can be crowdsourced to an extent, right? Like, you can come up with these as a team. You can pull in different people from different parts of the organization. You have to be careful not to pull in too many people, because, as I'm sure you'll probably find out from working with multiple people in your organization, that there might be a difference of opinion, right? So you kind of have to find the common denominator too. And find something that's maybe a universally agreed upon key behavior that really matches the culture and the values of your organization. And again, if you're doing this from a professional standpoint, you can do this for your team members. And if you're doing this from a personal standpoint, you can go ahead and do this for aspirational key behaviors, right? Like, what are the things that you aspire to, that you want to work on, and that you want to get better at, and that you want to level up on? So here's the fun part, at least for me. How do we then turn this into actual practical learning materials to assign to our leaders in our organization to have them complete, right? And what I'd like to do is encourage you to think beyond e-learning and instructor-led trainings, right? So think beyond kind of your typical ways that we do leadership development, and think about videos or courses or virtual reality, e-learning, mobile learning. You can still do in-person training. You can still do virtual instructor-led, but I'm just saying, don't be afraid to branch out from that too. Books, you can do a book club, podcasts. There are conferences that you can attend. There are conferences that are free. There are conferences that are paid, workshops. You could even have leaders sign up and participate in events with different associations. Self-reflection and self-assessment is also good. Case studies, having them do some of their own research or like a project-based learning. So there's a ton of different ways that you can deliver these leadership lessons to the different people in your organization. Okay, so I have what I've kind of built out as an example possible leadership path for that leader of others that we talked about based on those 6 key behaviors that I identified in the earlier slide. And so if you think about this in terms of what should happen when and the cadence of when this should be taken and how long it should be taken, my answer is going to be it depends, right? So let me just go ahead and show you the examples that I came up with. So number 1, we had the key behavior of building trust between your team members. And so in this example leadership path, I said, okay, well, we can have someone take a LinkedIn course on building trust. Easy, traditional, it's kind of the traditional way to do it. And then as far as providing constructive criticism for your team, maybe you do a small group workshop on constructive criticism. For the customer focus core value, we talked about keeping abreast with product updates. So maybe you make sure that the L&D team is doing virtual sessions on product updates regularly. And then as far as problem solving, maybe we curate 2 or 3 podcasts that we really like that are on problem solving that we have our leaders listen to. And then that last core value of respect, we talked about building sensitivity. And so, insert sensitivity leadership book here. There are so many of them, but maybe you have the leaders read a leadership book on sensitivity and then do a book club together, right? Or do book clubs in small groups, right? And then as far as providing inclusive resources, there are so many awesome resources out there right now on inclusive leadership. And so maybe what you do is you attend one of the conferences on inclusive leadership. So this is, again, just an example of what you could do. And I've kind of tried to pick the most different types of learning deliverables here. This is kind of like a unique collage of learning deliverables, but I just wanted to kind of give you some ideas and some inspiration on different things that you can do. And so some extra considerations. So one of the things that you can do is you can really, really take this framework and customize it however you want. If you have and some companies do, if you have 5 or 6 core values at your company, you're probably like, oh my gosh, we can't make the leaders take 18 different courses or do 18 different things. They just don't have the bandwidth for that. So one of the ways that you can kind of move around this is to look at performance reviews, right? A lot of places, if they have a heavy emphasis on core values, will have already embedded into performance management some kind of goal or metric based on those core values. And if not, that's okay too. You can go ahead and just kind of look and see if there's anything that would indicate strengths or weaknesses in the different core values from performance reviews. And then what you can do is you can create a program that helps to highlight or strengthen those certain core values for different leaders. So it can be super customized. The other thing you can do is spread it out over time. So maybe year 1, you just focus on one core value, and year 2, you focus on the other, and year 3. and you make it a 3-year program, right? And you give people ample time to be able to participate, right? And so there's so many different ways that you can customize this to make it work for everyone, because that's really the important part, right? Is making it worth the time and worth the effort, and embedding it into performance and getting leadership buy-in and all those things. So, you really can do with it whatever you want. And the other thing too is, like, you could even create a course that everyone takes as like their first leadership course across all levels, and have something that, like, as an organization you take to kind of start things off. And that said, I just talked about like custom paths and 3-year programs and like all this stuff that's probably making your head spin. But you don't need to create all the materials for a leadership development program. There are so many amazing leadership resources out there. I am working on my dissertation right now, and I'm doing it on leadership competencies. And I can tell you from experience, there are so many leadership resources out there, an overwhelming amount of leadership resources. And it's a lot less time consuming to go through some of those that are on the specific topics you're looking for than to kind of recreate the wheel. So don't be afraid to curate your content and pick and choose. And then you can go ahead and develop things to kind of fill in the blanks, and develop the things that you're maybe missing, or that you want to have a personalized message along with it, right? And then, of course, you don't want to forget to measure the progress, right? So whether you're looking at a performance metric to see if it improves over time, or you're doing 360 reviews at your organization where a manager gives a performance review to their team members, but the team members also then do a performance review of the manager, and you get that, back and forth of the reviews and everything. And then you can also look at, the different projects. So for example, if we're looking at customer focus, what are the ways that we can measure that we as an organization are improving in customer focus? Do we look at, how many calls we get to our helpline? Or there's ways within the business, if you look for them, that you can kind of measure the progress here. And then, of course, the traditional way, right? Have people reflect on what they've learned, provide them with knowledge checks or assessments on what they've learned, and, do satisfaction surveys to see how they feel about things. And so those are just some additional tips and tricks as you kind of set the framework. And so, I saved a little bit of time for any questions, and I would love for you, if you are not already, to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can connect with me on Twitter, but I'm not as active on Twitter for sure.
Awesome. Well, I think there was a lot to unpack there, and actually, something someone said has made me want to ask a question. Actually, so we've got from Benjamin here. Everyone needs to take this training. Same executive. I don't need to take that training. I feel like this is something we've all, if we've tried to put like a top to bottom plan in place, we've experienced this conversation, right? Do you have any kind of tips about how to go about that conversation? Because me personally, that's when I have to call in someone else, because that's where my brain just goes, "You're gonna shout." That's
Yeah. So, I think that that's part of change management a little bit. And I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole there, but, some elements to good change management are having people, in your corner. So like, yeah, there are going to be executives that are like, I don't need to take that training. We ran into in an LMS implementation in a previous life, someone who was like, oh, I think what you're doing is really great, even though I haven't logged into our LMS in 2 years, right? And like, she was really high up, and she was like, what does this mean? And we were like, oh my goodness. But you do need to find those people who are into it. And there are going to be people who are super into it in your organization. You have to find those people and then get their buy-in and get them excited about it and get them involved. And it's a really good way. You know, I hate to say it, but it's like peer pressure, right? Like even as an adult, peer pressure, right? And so if everybody is like taking this training, it's a lot more likely that you'll get some of those, I don't need to take that training people. And if you can get kind of, you know, build that buy-in and build, you know, and have people at the higher levels willing to take the courses first or pilot them, then you're kind of like creating the culture that hopefully eventually weeds those executives out on its own. That makes sense.
No, I think that's important. I think rather than peer pressure, we've rebranded them as champions, haven't we? They're like the
change
GDPR
champions.
That's it. Yeah. It comes with a free cape and a little mask, so no one knows who you really are.
Yes.
Awesome. Tanya's asking, said it's amazing material. Will you send out the slides, or better yet, our presentation, please? I mean, for the second part, everything is recorded. So if you want to rewatch it, like with the full presentation, it'll be up on the YouTube channel later this evening. So by tomorrow morning, effectively, you'll be able to watch it as many times as you want. I'm not sure if you're sharing slides or not. Everyone feels differently about handing out slides.
I don't mind. I'm not sure what a good way to go about that is. So if you add me on LinkedIn, I'll definitely send you a link to it. How about that?
There we go. We'll because a few people have asked about different presentations today, so I'll see if we can work out some kind of central repository as well.
That'd be awesome.
Just to make life a little bit easier. I don't want you guys are giving your time. I don't want you to then get like 150 requests. Please
send
email
me the
these slides. Next up then, what empowerment measures are needed for every 5 levels of leadership?
That's an in-depth question. Well, I would honestly start by Googling just like different key behaviors associated with empowerment. That's a good way to get like some resources. I'm sure we could probably crowdsource a couple here. I don't know if we have time to talk about all 5 levels. That's kind of deep. But empowerment, something that comes to mind for me that might, I don't know which level this would apply at, but, you know, something on confidence, right? So there could be like a confidence during difficult conversations but that could be at any level, right? I'm mostly thinking leader of self and leader of others, because I would hope that like leader of leaders are a little bit past that already. But again, it depends on your organization. What else for empowerment? Maybe something as simple as just knowing and understanding where all of the different resources are for your organization. So maybe as like leader of self, something, it doesn't even have to be like a course, right? But knowing where to go, all the different places to go when you need help. And that's something that can like live in a knowledge base or an LMS. What are your thoughts, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I think both of what you said are great. I think the only thing that I ever kind of think is any opportunity you've got to allow someone in that kind of leadership development situation to go and then develop another person. So especially if you've got quite a hierarchical business. I once worked in a business that literally assigned people a number. So you were somewhere between a level 8 and a level 1. So that was nice. That was pleasant to be referred to as, oh, you're a level 7. Good, good. It wasn't Orwellian in any way.
Oh no.
But anyway, to use that for simplicity, if you've just put a level 5 through this program, let's say, well, they're going to have several level 6s reporting to them. Have them go and run that session for that group of leaders. That's incredibly empowering, and it saves you work. Which is the best kind of empowerment of your people, in my opinion.
Yes.
But we all know this, right? We all learn best by doing and going and training someone else, be it e-learning, be it face-to-face. Do the same with your people. They'll engage with it a lot more if they're back in control. That's the thing, right?
Absolutely.
Let's have a look. We've got a couple of bits of advice coming in. So we've got get them excited, curious, and then apply pressure.
I love it.
So I think that's excellent advice for all things in life, in fact.
Yes.
That can be applied to. And then always start with Google and Wikipedia, but never tell anyone you did that.
Absolutely. How do you think I made this presentation?
Oh dear. Excellent. That's the cornerstone of everything ever written. Just no one wants to admit it.
It's true. Yeah. That's how when I actually was building out a leadership development program, I did a lot of Googling.
Yeah. Well, it's got a weird kind of, oh, you can't just pull information off the internet. It's like, well, someone put it there. Like, there is some rubbish out there. We all know that. But there's also so much good. Like, even we heard earlier today, you can get an insight into what it's like working in industry by looking at a Reddit post, of someone's daily life. It sounds crazy to pull your research from somewhere like that, but if you're careful with it, I think it can be really effective. So anyone for any more questions? We'll give it, as it's our last session of the day, we're not in a rush, so we'll give it a moment. We've got clapping. That's
always nice.
I think we might be done.
Great.
Just check there's nothing in the other event one. Guidelines. Yeah, no, that's everything. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I thought that was really interesting. Loads to take away from that.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone else for joining us for the most of today, if not all of today. It's been a pleasure. Obviously, this was just day 1. We have 2 more days of this. You cannot escape. You don't know it yet, but the doors have been locked. There are people outside. You cannot leave. No, we've got 2 more fantastic days. We're kicking off at 10 a.m. UK time tomorrow morning with a session on screencasting. Then tomorrow we've got branching scenarios, podcasting, project management, inclusive image selection. We've got learning science. We've got, oh blimey, what have we got? Learning personas and keyboard shortcuts to round out the day. So loads more amazing stuff to come. If anyone's hanging about, I'll be in one of the session rooms again for a little bit because I don't want to go and do real life stuff yet again. I have to answer emails and stuff if I leave here. Thank you all once again, and we will see you again soon.